Mark stood at the back of the plush, dimly lit gallery, his hands trembling in his pockets. On the main stage, his art professor, Evelyn Vance, was holding a champagne flute, gesturing toward a canvas that Mark had spent 6 weeks painting in a windowless basement. "It's my most personal work yet," Evelyn told the crowd of wealthy collectors. Mark felt the blood rush to his face. He hadn't just been replaced, he had been erased. Mark wasn't a stranger to hard work. He was a senior at the prestigious Hawthorne Institute of Fine Arts, and Evelyn Vance was the woman who held his future in her hands. She was a legend in the local scene, sharp, sophisticated, and notoriously difficult to please. When she asked Mark to leave his latest still life piece in her studio for additional critique and exposure, Mark felt like he'd finally made it. He thought she was going to show it to a gallery owner, a recommendation for his post-grad career. He didn't think she was going to scrub his signature off the corner. 2 weeks later, Mark was scrolling through a high-end lifestyle magazine when he saw it. There was Evelyn, leaning against his painting. The caption read, "Vance's newest original, The Weight of Silence, sold to a private collector for $5,000. Mark's heart hit the floor. $5,000 was more than he had in his entire savings account, and that painting was supposed to be his ticket into the National Gallery competition. But Evelyn was just getting started with her lies. The next morning, Mark burst into her office, the magazine crumpled in his hand. "Professor, why is my painting in a magazine with your name on it?" he demanded, his voice cracking. Evelyn didn't even look up from her desk. She just took a slow sip of her espresso and sighed. "Mark, don't be dramatic. As a student in my studio, your output technically belongs to the institution's collective portfolio. I simply facilitated a sale. You should be happy people are seeing it." Mark couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You sold it for $5,000 and told them you painted it." Evelyn finally looked at him, her eyes cold as ice. She let out a short, condescending laugh. "Who are they going to believe, Mark? A world-renowned artist or a student who can barely afford his own turpentine? Be careful. I can make sure you never get a gallery showing in this city as long as you live." Mark walked out of that office feeling small, but the gears were already turning. He knew Evelyn was arrogant, but he wondered if she was also lazy. He started digging. He spent the next week in the campus library and on social media, tracking down Evelyn's original works from the last 5 years. He reached out to former students, sending them DMs with photos of Evelyn's famous pieces. The responses started flooding in. "Wait, that's my landscape," one girl replied. "I thought she lost it in the move." Another guy sent Mark a photo of his own sketches that looked identical to a mural Evelyn had been paid $10,000 to paint for a tech startup. Mark realized he wasn't just dealing with a thief, he was dealing with a serial predator. He gathered 6 other students. They met in a crowded diner, hushed voices over cold coffee. They realized that 90% of Evelyn's masterpiece portfolio was actually stolen student work. They had the sketches, the time-stamped digital progress photos, and the original reference materials. They had everything they needed to bury her. But Mark knew they had to wait for the right moment. Something about the way Evelyn smiled during her lectures that week made Mark realize she thought she was untouchable. Mark's first move was surgical. He tracked down the private collector who bought his painting, a man named Mr. Sterling. Mark didn't call him to scream. He sent an anonymous professional email. He attached 10 photos of his process, the initial charcoal sketch, the first layer of oil, the half-finished bowl of fruit. He included a photo of the hidden M. He'd textured into the paint of one of the grapes, a mark Evelyn hadn't noticed when she cleaned the canvas. Mr. Sterling didn't reply immediately, but Mark knew the seed was planted. Then came the big night, the Hawthorne Lifetime Achievement Gala. The school was honoring Evelyn for her unparalleled contribution to arts. The room was packed with donors, the press and the board of directors. Evelyn was the center stage, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Mark's tuition. Right as the dean stepped up to the microphone to hand Evelyn her glass trophy, the heavy oak door at the back of the hall swung open. Mark walked in first, followed by the 6 other students. They weren't carrying signs or shouting. They were carrying large foam board prints. The room went silent. Mark walked straight to the front, right up to the stage. He didn't wait for permission. He turned his board around to face the audience. It was a side-by-side comparison of Evelyn's award-winning piece from 2022 and the student's dated sketchbook. The other students followed suit, lining the stage with proof of a decade of theft. Evelyn's face went from pale to a ghostly hiss, trying to keep her composed mentor persona. Mark looked her dead in the eye and spoke loud enough for the microphone to catch it. "We're just showing the output of the studio, Professor. Isn't that what you told me? That our work belongs to you?" The dean looked at the boards, then at Evelyn, then back at the boards. The evidence was undeniable, but the final nail in the coffin came from the back of the room. Mr. Sterling stood up. "I've already contacted my lawyers," he announced. "I don't appreciate buying a Vance and getting a mark, and I certainly don't appreciate being part of a fraud." The gala turned into a crime scene. Evelyn wasn't just fired, she was dismantled. The board launched a full fraud investigation that lasted 6 months. Because she had used the school's name to facilitate the sales of stolen art, she was legally required to pay back every single cent she earned from the student work with interest. She had to sell her penthouse and her private collection just to cover the legal fees and settlements. She went from being the maestro of the city to a blacklisted pariah in 48 hours. No gallery would touch her. No school would hire her. Mark and the other students, however, got their original works back, plus the royalties they were owed. Mark eventually saw Evelyn one last time. She was working at a small craft store at a different town, stocking shelves with the cheap watercolors. She didn't see him and he didn't say a word. He just walked out knowing he'd finally finished his masterpiece. Yeah, so what do you guys think? Evelyn's biggest mistake was confusing Mark's silence for lack of spying. She was so blinded by her own ego, that the gala, she didn't see the exits closing, forgetting that the people she stepped on to climb the ladder were actually talking to each other. This wasn't just about stolen painting. It was a collective strike that didn't just cost her a job, it erased her identity in front of the very people she worshipped, Alright, see you guys on the next one. This is Retaliation Diaries. Subscribe and see ya.